Hello, guys, and welcome back to Count to 10. My name is Arnie, and today we have a very special podcast. We have a live Viva demonstration. I'm lucky enough to be joined by candidate Ben, who's currently sitting the exam. These Vivas, no matter where you do it, no matter when you're doing it, they're always stressful. The fact that Ben has volunteered to do one of these recorded, I really want to thank him, and obviously we're wishing him best of luck for the exam next week. For those who have listened to my previous Practice Live Viva demonstrations, you guys know the basic format. It's a 1 minute perusal followed by two topics, 5 minutes each. So the Viva itself will go for 10 minutes. On the day, it's a bit different for the candidates. You have 2 minutes of perusal, but we're just shortening it down for the kind of making it more feasible in a podcast setting. And then it's a 20-minute Viva followed by that station repeated another 2 times. So you have three 20-minute stations on the day. So this is a bit of a condensed format, but you guys know how it goes. So let's dive straight into it. Hey, Ben, thanks for joining me. I know it's a bit nerve-wracking to do this. How are you feeling a week out from your exam?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Obviously nervous, but kind of just want to get it over and done with now. Only a week to go.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done a lot of practice vivas already. You know how this goes. So I think we might as well just jump straight in. I'm going to set up my timer and then we'll go straight into it. So I'll give you a 1 minute perusal. Then we'll do two topics, 5 minutes each per topic. I'll just let you know when we change topics and it's a 10-minute viva. So if you're ready, your perusal starts now. And your opening stem is, how is oxygen supplied to your anesthetic machine? I'm just going to repeat that one more time. How is oxygen supplied to your anesthetic machine? You got 45 seconds and then we'll get started. So hello there, candidate. My name is Arnie. Do you understand the opening question?
I do.
Great. Can you tell me, how is oxygen supplied to the anesthetic machine?
Oxygen is supplied from either the wall pipeline, which can be supplied from your VIE or your vacuum insulated evaporator, or from cylinder manifolds. There is also supplemental supply from a smaller cylinder on the back of your machine.
Perfect. What safety features distinguish an oxygen pipeline from another gas pipeline supply?
So you're describing on the actual wall from what the safety features can be? Yep.
Yeah.
So at the connection between the wall outlet and the machine, there are unique um, seals. So these are um, unique thread configurations. So I can't recall what they're named. There's also color coding. So for oxygen, say it's a black and white versus so that's for uh, room for medical air, while oxygen is just plain white.
Good.
There are um, other distinguishing features. Actually, I'm not too sure what you're referring to.
That's fine. So you mentioned the wall sockets. So if I was
Yeah.
to take a nitrous oxide wall socket, not nitrous oxide pipeline, would I be able to fit this into an oxygen pipeline supply?
No, so the threads are unique in their circumference or their diameter.
Yeah, good. And what's
Uh,
the reason that we have these safety features for the anesthetic machine?
to prevent the incorrect gas from being administered to an individual. So, and it's called the sleeve index system. Sorry.
Perfect. That's great. So say I accidentally disconnect the oxygen supply from the pipeline. How would you tell using your anesthetic machine that there is a fault that's occurring?
Right. So there are pressure and pressure regulators that can sense the kind of the supplied pressure to the anesthetic machine. So the pressure at which oxygen is supplied is different to, say, other gases like nitrous oxide or medical air.
Cool.
There are also end-tidal or not end-tidal, but gas analysis that can detect the concentration or partial pressure of a delivered agent or gas.
Good. Is there any alarms that you know of?
So is it called the hypoxic gas alarm? I'm not sure. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. So can this alarm be silenced, say if it goes off?
No, it's non-silenceable as a safety measure.
Yeah, good. What if I disconnect the nitrous oxide from the wall, but keep the oxygen? Will this affect my oxygen supply?
Oxygen is the last gas to enter the back bar or the flow meter, and I don't believe removing nitrous would have an effect.
Yeah, good. And what if my anesthetic machine has a rotometer set up? Do you know which side is my rotometer for oxygen versus nitrous oxide?
So oxygen is on the rotometer usually to the left, but when it enters the actual back bar or the final supply, it is the last to enter on the right.
Yeah, perfect. That's really good. So what if so say I turn off my nitrous oxide. What prevents my nitrous oxide from going up to 100% when I use my anesthetic machine? Why can't I not do this?
Okay, so safety features initially used to be, I think, mechanical. You would have a chain linking system on your rotometer. So if you dialed up your nitrous, you would also have to dial up your oxygen to prevent administration of hypoxic gas mixture.
Yeah, good.
Newer systems, I believe, are calibrated electronically.
Yeah. What's the maximum amount of nitrous oxide I can dial up on my anesthetic machine?
70%.
Yeah. And with that 70%, what would be the minimum alveolar concentration that you'd expect to see with nitrous oxide?
The minimum alveolar concentration.
Hmm.
Um, um, so, at 0.6 of a Mach, so not like 2/3 of a Mach value.
Yeah, good. How does nitrous oxide facilitate the concentration effect? Actually, we're going to stop there and go to another topic. So can you tell me, where is oxytocin released from?
Oxytocin is released from the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus, but it is released at the posterior pituitary.
Yep, so produced at the super optic nuclei. Great. Where does it work on the body?
So it works on oxytocin receptors, which can be found in the uterus, or especially upregulated in the gravid uterus or the laboring uterus. It also has weak effects on ADH or V2 receptors, sorry, due to its similarity in molecular structure. It also, I believe, may work centrally or supraspinally, known as like the love hormone, and
That's nice.
it can increase or sorry, that's all I can think of at the moment.
That's okay. How do these receptors work? So what receptor does oxytocin work on?
These would be G stimulatory protein coupled receptors.
Yeah. And what are the exact steps that occur when oxytocin binds to these receptors?
Right. So the ligand would bind to the receptor, would cause G, sorry, causes a dissociation of the receptor, so a dissociation of the G protein coupled receptors. So the alpha subunit moves away from the beta gamma subunit. The alpha subunit usually is involved in the intracellular second messenger system, so an increase in adenylyl cyclase, protein kinase A, and or cyclic AMP and protein kinase A, which then phosphorylate intracellular things. And the beta gamma subunit is usually mediates ion changes in ion fluxes,
Yeah.
like sodium and potassium.
And you mentioned GS. Are they working on only GS receptors, or are they working on other receptors?
I'm not sure. I thought it was only GS.
Okay. What are the side effects of oxytocin?
So they can be cardiovascular in nature, so a hypotensive effect with a potential reflex tachycardia. They can prolong the QT interval. They can cause an increase in pulmonary, I think it can cause pulmonary hypertension. It can cause nausea and vomiting potentially through its hypotensive effect. On the uterus, it causes a increase in the frequency of contractions, or at high doses, a sustained contraction,
Good.
which can result in a reduction in supply to the fetus of blood and cause a fetal hypoxia. And it has a weak water retaining effect through its action at V2 receptors in the collecting tubule.
Yeah. So the water retaining effect, how would I tell that this is occurring in a patient?
Potentially through catheterization of the patient, and they may have a reduced urine output,
Good.
or biochemically, you may see a weak dilutional hyponatremia.
Yeah. And what would be paired with that hyponatremia?
Um, I'm not sure. Sorry.
That's okay. So you mentioned the weak ADH effects having an effect on the kidneys. What specifically is the effect on the kidney that leads to this?
I'm not sure, but going from first principles, so binding to the basolateral membrane of the collecting tubules from via V2 receptors would mediate a insertion of aquaporin 2 into the luminal membrane of said tubules, causing a osmotic shift of water from the tubules into the medullary interstitium.
Good. You mentioned that when you give oxytocin, you see a drop in blood pressure. Say I give someone ADH, what would happen to their blood pressure?
So ADH could then potentially mediate an effect through V1 receptors
Good.
in the systemic circulation, causing a hypertensive effect.
Yeah. And what type of receptors are these?
So are these not the V1 receptors?
Sorry, what type of G protein coupled receptors?
Oh, okay. Well, then I would say they'd have to be either, probably GS or GQ. So I'm not sure.
That's okay. So say I'm doing so I'm doing a Caesar. What is the bolus dose of oxytocin I give to a person close to Caesar? And we'll stop
Uh,
there. Nerve-wracking?
yeah, very.
How do you feel?
Uh, yeah, I could have done a lot better, I'd say. And then there were questions at the end there that I knew that I had the answer to, if only I had just been a bit quicker.
Yeah, I think well, let's delve into that a bit more. Can you tell me one thing that you think you did well and one thing you think you could have improved on? I know you already said the one thing you think you could have improved on, but what's another thing that I think you did well?
Uh, it's always the classification and just coming out with small packages of knowledge that you can just rattle off a bit quicker. So, with the safety mechanisms for wall supply, something I haven't read about for a while, but it's really easy to just come out with a whole list of safety features if you just kind of with a package of knowledge, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And the one thing that you think you could have improved on, do you think it's probably just getting through the questions a bit faster or something else?
No, that and kind of what I just mentioned as well.
Yeah. Look, I think there's very fair criticisms, but also these are really mean and very hard vibers that I've given you. And I think on the day you'd be really unlucky to get these. But I'm not here to be mean and do these on purpose. The reason I gave these two vibers, specifically the first viber, which is you're my guinea pig for it, unfortunately, but it's come from the 2021 second sitting
Yeah.
exam, which
Yeah.
was essentially describe the features that prevent allows safety in patients. It's safety in oxygen supply within cylinders, gas, and the anesthetic machine. And the opening question, how is oxygen supplied to the anesthetic machine, has been asked 3 times in the past. It's asked in various ways, but has been asked 3 times. It's an opening stem that's been recorded within Mac 95. And uh, when you get these tricky vibes where the topic is quite peripheral, I think the level of expectation of knowledge from the examiner, obviously I'm not an examiner, but the level of expectation of knowledge is not as high. I think knowing the bare minimums and the safety features and kind of just actually talking about what you see on a day-to-day basis clinically and what you see with your eyes every day that you go to work is probably okay to get through this Viva. And really, if I was being critiquing you, I would have said that you probably did enough to pass on that Viva, which you might not feel like in the moment because parts of it you thought you could have sped up, and I do agree with that. But you got the main features. You got the fact that there's a specific socket and a hose. You got the fact that it's color coded. You corrected yourself to what color oxygen is, and you knew, although without saying it, like you knew the index safety system and these kind of things already. And this all comes from the professional statement 54. So yes, you could have done that a bit quicker, but I think the next time you get this, you'll know this really well.
Yeah, for sure.
And the reason we asked this question, or reason I asked this question, is because of the way that your written exam was constructed. It was very clinically based. And so this is a very clinically based Viva in the fact that it is something that's specifically spelled out within the learning objectives, but it's something that we don't read about all the time, although we use it and see it every time. So things like, what is the important reason why all these safety features exist? And that's the crux. That's like the second question I asked you. And it's essentially to prevent a hypoxic mixture delivery and being safe. And as long as you understand that, I think you understand to be a safe anesthetist. Like we have all these mechanisms and you're understanding how to be safe. Then we talked about the specific things like how would you tell if I disconnected the pipeline, and you'd said, your FI2 reading might go down, you might have an alarm, and you don't need to know the exact name of the alarm. It's like, all I know is it's an oxygen failure alarm. Like, I don't know if that's the exact name, or like an anti-hypoxic alarm, but you knew that you couldn't silence the alarm. And the reason is because, again, it's a safety feature. You knew what would happen if I gave someone nitrous oxide and I took this off the wall, why that oxygen is the last gas that enters the main gas manifold stream. You even knew the specific point of, which side is the oxygen rotameter supposed to be on. And it's supposed to be on like the far left side. And it's supposed to have this weird different texture to all the other knobs, which are stupid things that if you don't read the professional guide, you won't know. But again, I don't expect you to know that because this is a very left field Viva. So although you felt in the moment, you probably thought you weren't doing the best, you covered most of the stuff. So how do you feel now hearing that feedback?
Yeah, a touch better.
And then, there wasn't too many questions that were left on this Viva. We were just going to talk about nitrous oxide, and you got, the correlation between the total amount of nitrous oxide you can give, which is roughly around about 0.7 or 0.75
right.
in a patient. It's just anything that is in a hypoxic mixture. And you correlated that with the MAC of nitrous oxide, which is always easy to do if you think about it, because the MAC of nitrous oxide is 100% or 105. So if you just kind of think, oh yeah, 70 must be 70%, 0.7. So that's the easy kind of my simple way to calculate it. And then we went in to talk about, then we would just go and talk about specific things like the concentration effect or the second gas effect, because these are things that we commonly use on a day-to-day basis, especially when we're gas inducing the pediatric population to increase the effect of other gases and make the gas induction go faster. And then we'd finish off the Viva talking about diffusion hypoxia, which again just relates back to nitrous oxide principles of it being a fast gas that enters the alveoli quickly and it dilutes everything in the alveoli, so the other gases, being oxygen, now have a less partial pressure, and it so creates an hypoxic mixture. So there wasn't too much left on that Viva, which was really good. And I think you did really well for a Viva that I don't think many people would have seen before, and definitely is a low likelihood of coming up in the exam. But it's just one of those things. The best advice I have on this is every examiner who's examining the topic, it's like their favorite topic, so they have a different amount of expectation, but good examiners will know, like, they'll be able to kind of rein that in and lead you down a path. And I don't think I'm a good examiner because I'm not leading you down a path. I'm just going off a script. And so I think you'll do much better on the day.
Thanks.
How do you think you went with the oxytocin Viva?
A little bit better. It's
Yeah.
one that I've had kind of a variation of a theme on before. So
Yeah.
um, again, speed.
Yeah. And again, you might have got oxytocin in multiple different ways. You might have got oxytocin in terms of talking about, uterotonic drugs, talking about how oxytocin versus ergometrin versus carboprost and going down that pathway. This is a very like physiological based fiber. It's like, tell me how oxytocin works on a very specific molecular level, like what kind of receptor. And you really wouldn't have thought that you'd get asked about G protein coupled receptors and how they specifically work. But I can't officially tell you that I got asked this on my Viva, but I can unofficially tell you that I might have got asked this on my Viva. And so therefore, this is what actually knowing this little intricate stuff, they do care about it. And you're so surprised again, because remember, it's someone's favorite Viva. So they want to know specifically that you know that it's GQ receptors that it works on within the uterus, and GQ receptors increase calcium. And you want to know that the other subset are GS protein coupled receptors that it works on in the kidneys to have the ADH effect. And the GQ pathway, if you remember, is increasing the activity of phospholipase that then cleaves off into your IP3 and your DAG, which then increases your calcium. And your GS is the one you described, where it's the increased activity of adenylyl cyclase, increased activity of cyclic AMP, and so on, that increases the activity in that way. But you mentioned the main things. Again, if we're talking about this in terms of what's safe, you mentioned the things that are safe. You knew the side effects. The only side effect that I probably thought, probably had to question myself was you mentioned pulmonary hypertension, and I wasn't sure that oxytocin causes that.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's probably not, but I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. But you mentioned the main things: nausea, vomiting, hypotension. And then you mentioned the really important thing that I think gets missed a lot with oxytocin in terms of side effects, which is the dose dependent effect on uterine tone and the effect it has on fetal viability, fetal asphyxia, and fetal well-being. I think that's really important. And again, it just shows that you're safe and you know your knowledge in terms of what is safe and what's not safe. So you know the key points. Then you also know the intricate points. And I was the one I was when I was giving you this five, and I asked the question, where does ADH work on what would happen if you gave ADH to the BP? And you're like, I'm not sure, but by first principles, and you rattled off this perfect answer of exactly where ADH works in terms of affecting the BP, in terms of the vascular smooth muscles in the V1. But it was I think it was a really nice trick that you have to answering your questions, which was that I'm not sure, but going off my first principles, this is what I think. Is that something you worked on?
Yeah. If I'm not like 100% sure, it's just a nice way to kind of take a guess, but also sound like you know a little bit.
Yeah. And, as someone that was examining on the other side, it felt like I didn't mark you down for saying that first. Like, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. And then when you said everything correct, I'm like, great. Like, this is perfect. Yeah. And then the Viva, again, didn't have many questions left. We were just going to talk about what dose of oxytocin you give post the cesarean section, why you need an infusion because oxytocin is metabolized so rapidly by oxygenases. And then we'd go into a really specific question that I didn't really care if you didn't know the answer to, which was, do you know the ED50 of oxytocin and why we have to give such certain drugs?
Like around 0.4 or something, or
Yeah,
0.38.
it's something really small. It's like 0.05, but it doesn't matter
Oh,
because again, what you displayed in just telling me that is that you understand it has to be a super low amount because it can't be, it can't be 3 units because we give 3 units to everyone. It has to be a super low amount because we have to have a high safety margin because it's not one of those drugs that you can give half measurably. When you're giving it to improve uterine tone, you want it to improve uterine tone. So now hearing all the feedback, how do you feel?
a little better. A little surprised I forgot the cellular like G, Q, and GS stuff, but yeah, a little bit better. Thanks.
Yeah. And I think that's pressure will do that. And certainly this is a very artificial environment that we've created to do the Viva, in terms of it's a live, demonstration. You know that you're being recorded. It's not optimal. But in other ways, the fact that you've done this is actually really good practice for the day as well, because it's a very artificial environment that you walk into. You walk into a room that has set corridors, set cubicles with a piece of paper in front of it. There's people that are there to chaperone you. There are people there when you walk in, seats, there's the way just it's all set up. It's very artificial and you can't help but becoming nervous. And that's your natural response to that environment. So the more you do things that are difficult, so more you do Vibas with people that are scary to you, that might not be nice to you, it just makes you much more comfortable on the day. And that's what you got to be. I hopefully haven't shattered you too much, Ben.
Mate, you're not scary.
I'm not doing my job. I should become more scary. No, I want to thank you for doing this again, and I hope you got some technical and some non-technical skills out of this. And I really appreciate your time, and I wish you all the best of luck for your Viva next week. I know that you'll smash it, and just remember those principles. Just keep it simple. Make sure you keep displaying your answers. You're very safe in your answers, and you know the core knowledge. It's okay if you don't know the peripheral stuff, because I think you'll do absolutely fine. So thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope the listeners enjoyed this. And I think we'll be back with one more practice live Viva demonstration in another week's time. So keep your eyes out for that. And you can download it on any podcasting stream, Apple, Spotify, wherever you may get your podcast.